Welcome to Prepping for the Studio. If you're a musician or musical artist that wants to learn more about what goes on, how to prepare, or how to make the most out of your studio session, you're in the right place. Hello, and welcome back to Prepping for the Studio, the podcast for musicians who want to learn more about the studio, what goes on, how to prepare, and how to make the most out of their time and money. I'm Roy Silverstein, and I'm joined by my co-host, Brian Scheuble.
Howdy doody.
How you doing, Brian?
I'm pretty good.
Excellent. Well, it's season 2 of the podcast, and we have guests. And Today I'm very happy to have Tavia here.
Hello.
How you doing, Tavia?
I'm great. I'm honored to be here.
Yay.
We love having you, and the cool thing is that Tavia is a musician, just like you guys listening, and a songwriter, and Tavia...
Producer,
I guess you'd say.
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of things. Any other role that we should add on?
Collaborator.
Artist,
collaborator, just like you guys out there. And that's why I want to have her on, because I want to get that perspective, not from engineers like me and Brian and other engineers that we've had on, but from a musician, someone who's been using studios. And what's great about you, Tavia, is that you've kind of jumped right into using studios, right?
Yes, I did.
And so it wasn't like you were like, oh, I did a bunch of home recording and then, slowly made my way into studio work. It was just like, I'm getting into songwriting and now I'm going to go right into the studio. And so you've learned a lot.
Well, I did do about 100 to 1,000 demos before I came here. You just didn't know that. They're on my iPhone.
Okay. iPhone demos. Okay. So, yeah, I'm learning things too. So, when did you start writing songs?
I started writing songs in middle school, but just kind of played around with it. And then in 2017 is when I became a prolific songwriter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean prolific because you write a lot of songs.
Yes, I do.
How many songs do you say you would write per week or whatever?
It varies. I go in phases. So sometimes I'll write 3 songs in one day and then I won't write for a week, but I've written hundreds.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Amazing. Yeah.
They
That's
don't
awesome.
all make it to the studio, of course.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what got you kind of interested in songwriting or music in the first place?
I went through a pretty tragic situation with my family, and so there was a guitar in the place where I was staying, and I picked it up and started kind of noodling with it, and then realized maybe I could songwrite, just to work through the emotions of the moment.
Yeah.
And I never stopped.
Could you play guitar, or were you just...
Basic, yeah.
Right.
I
okay.
knew the major chords. And,
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
I'm strumming as I'm talking to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a common way I think people get into music, is to express negative emotions, unfortunately, but that's just the pain. It needs to come out somehow.
Yeah.
And that's one of the beautiful things about music, is it's an expression of that and lets you get it off your chest and heal.
Move on.
Yeah, move on.
And hopefully be relatable to someone who might need that song at the time.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Okay, so that kind of got you in, and then 2017, you said you really started digging in further into songwriting. Yeah. And you did do some iPhone kind of demos then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably thousands, to be honest.
Okay. Wow.
I love it.
And then what made you decide, okay, I need to get into a studio?
A couple things. One is I wanted the challenge. I had been to a studio with friends who were recording, and I thought, wow, that looks really hard. I want to try that. And then also I wanted higher quality recording. I wanted to work with engineers and producers who could help me elevate my craft.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, makes sense. How did you pick your first studio?
I went to a few different studios with my friends who were making an EP, and I just kind of looked for the feeling of the studio. I didn't really know much about equipment or even the engineers, but I knew that I had to connect with the people that I worked with. So, for instance, you, Roy, you reached out to me on social media. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't even remember.
But I felt a connection, and I had heard your equipment was really top of the line, and I was nervous to come here. And you're like, oh, don't worry, we'll make it work for you. And you were very inviting, and that's important to me. So I think more than the actual studio or structure was the personality of the people running it.
That is key.
Yeah.
And that's something that people don't maybe think about enough, but like you have to gel and vibe with the engineer and whoever producer, whoever you're going to be working with.
Yes.
Yep.
There has to be some friendly banter. There has to be, some humor. It can't all just be serious for me.
Yeah. Collaboration.
Yes.
It's important.
Yeah.
And if you connect, you're going to probably be a little more successful with your collaborations.
Exactly.
Yeah, you'll feel comfortable
Yeah.
and the space too matters, I think. But yeah, those things kind of might like be more important than the equipment or anything. 'Cause if you're in a beautiful studio with a nice equipment, but it's like, the people are not cool and not having a good time here, then that would ruin the whole thing.
Sure. And my very first studio I recorded out of was just a one-room studio in a building over downtown, but it felt cozy in there. So I don't think that song ever got released, but I got the experience of singing into microphone.
That's cool.
Yeah. And then I guess, what made you like kind of branch out from there to try other studios?
I wanted different experiences. I wanted to keep learning and growing as an artist and a songwriter. And I realized that I had so much to learn. So I figured I would look to see what each studio could offer. And ultimately, I work out of about 5 studios because I'm going to get different experiences and expertise. And that's, for me, the way that I grow.
And it's great for having you as a guest, too, because you've not just worked with me and a little bit with Brian, but like all these other people. And so you've kind of seen how different studios operate and you've, I'm sure,
personalities.
Dealt with different personalities, different environments. Is there anything that you found that is like common or widely different working with different places?
Or very important to have?
I choose the studios, so they do have a common thread in that they're inviting, and I only work with people who are going to have a balance between being supportive but also being open to giving me feedback. I don't want to just walk in and do it and leave. So like with you, Roy, I'll be like, how did that sound? And you'll be like, well, the last take was better. And I'm like, I want that. I want people who are straight shooters.
Yeah.
So that's the common thread for me, are the engineers and producers that I work with have a certain type of approach that works.
Right. So it's supportive, but also honest and...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can't be sensitive, I found. I mean, some people still are, but for me, if I want to grow, I have to just take everything people say as constructive criticism that they're trying to help me improve, not tell me I'm crappy.
Right, yeah. I mean, that would be bad if you were at a studio and all you got was like, man, you suck.
Exactly.
Why'd you come here? And, what's interesting too is you do bring like different, I guess, projects or songs to different studios. And I was curious, how do you go about deciding, okay, this song I want to do here at Rarefied, or this song I want to do at another studio or whatever?
So I figure out what my goal is for a certain project. So for example, if I know that the song is really fleshed out and I have the structure, the tempo, the key, sometimes I'm going to sing or I bring in a vocalist to sing, and I can visualize all the instruments that are going to be on that song, then I'll come here because I want to produce it and I want to, take charge of organizing who my session musicians are going to be and all of that. If I have a song that I really like the idea of, but I don't fully know where I'm going with it, or I know the bridge could be better, then I might go to another studio where there's a producer who's not just a producer, but a musician. I've been to studios where there's producers or engineers who say they're producers, but that's not the same as somebody who's going to pick up the guitar and say, what do you think about this? And sit there and actually workshop the song with me.
Yeah.
So maybe not the most efficient financially, but a way to get a better song.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that makes me think about how there's so many different types of producers, right?
Yes.
And you have producers that are just like, kind of maybe giving you a little performance coaching, but maybe they're not going to help you write the song or play anything on it. And then you have producers that you're talking about, like, who are going to go a little further and they're going to like help you write the song and maybe play on it and that kind of thing. So yeah, you have to kind of know what you need, I guess.
Yes. So all comes back to the song. What's going to serve the song?
Yep.
Totally.
Very good.
Yeah. What kind of mistakes? Here's the question. Because you started off jumping into studios fairly new at the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't know that much about what goes on in the studio, basically what we talk about in this podcast. So I'm sure there was things that you did at the beginning that you realize now you wasted some time and money. Like, what kind of things can you think of?
So I will say I don't think I wasted any time and money because I learned so much.
True. Good
point. I'll go back to that. I journaled after every session, even ones where I left crying, which I did occasionally.
Yeah.
However, I've learned about the necessity of preparation. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
I
totally.
didn't know what pre-production was when I started. Of course, I had just started. And now I actually have like a 20-step plan that I follow. And I'm very organized with my production.
Nice.
And thinking through all the things that I need to prepare for before I even walk in the door of the studio in terms of practicing and organizing. There's a lot of organizing that goes on for me because I'm a solo artist. I don't have a band. So for every project, I bring people together to become my band. Sometimes it's just me and a guitar. Sometimes it's a full band. And so the planning is essential. And that can take a long time because, for instance, if I bring in a vocalist, I won't just do one demo. I'll typically do multiple demos at different tempos, different keys, because I want to hear that artist sing. Even half a step can change how the song sounds coming out of their mouth.
Sure.
Or if they connect to it. And then workshopping my lyrics. I don't like coming in unless the lyrics are done. I want to memorize the lyrics when I sing. I don't want to come in and be like, okay, maybe we should change this line right here. I just don't think that's the ideal. I mean, it happens and I'm open to it, but it's not ideal.
We talk about that. It's like the best, I think, if you memorize the lyrics because you can really get into the song then and the meaning of it. And not be reading off a page.
Be living in the song.
Right.
The second thing is I had to identify my strengths and weaknesses as an artist, and that's not easy because you have to realize you can't do it all. So I figured out what I'm good at. I'm a songwriter, number one, and then a producer in the sense of bringing people together. And I'm not a great guitarist. I've been playing guitar for a long time, but it's only so that I can songwrite. I haven't taken the time to improve that craft because it's important to me.
Right.
So finding out who I can work with, who's going to support me, who's going to listen to my vision was really, really important. And then the last thing is communication. There's a whole vocabulary that goes on when you walk into a studio. For any of you out there who have never been into a studio, don't be afraid to ask, because I remember hearing scratch track and BPM and all these different terms that I didn't know what they were. I didn't know what a control room was versus a live room. And they're like, do you want to go into the live room? I'm like, what's that mean? It's scary if you don't know. And
yeah, very intimidating.
Yeah. And you just have to ask. And then I started taking notes and creating like a vocabulary so that I could follow and understand time signature. I mean, those are things that if you haven't studied music theory, you're not going to know necessarily 4/4 and 6/8 are something different. So really spent a lot of time learning about communication and then learning how to be less afraid to say something in terms of like, I can remember having Jake Nazier in here and I knew the term, but I couldn't remember it and it was fill. But I was like, I want you just to do a little dut here right before you go into the chorus. He goes, you mean a fill? And I'm like, yeah, fill, that's it. But in the moment, you've got to get the point across and you have to do whatever it takes. Sometimes you're just using your hands up in the air or you're tapping or whatever to communicate and not be afraid, because otherwise you're not going to get the results you want.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, if you don't know the terminology, then you have to find your own language and try to see if you can get your point across.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then in time, you learn those technical terms or whatever that are common in the studio, and then you can speak the language a little more efficiently.
Yeah,
for sure.
Also, that what you just said, if you're working with experienced guys in the studio, they're going to be able to read your hands going up in the air. Sometimes you're doing, can you do a dot 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 into the chorus? He knew what to say to you. Oh, you want to fill?
Yes.
So that helps.
Right. And likewise with a seasoned vocalist, I could be moving my hand, up in the air to get them to go to kind of a little bit of a more, arcing.
Or a wave. Vibrato, a little vibrato.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And they will be able to understand that.
Right.
Yeah.
So you did kind of mention some things already, but if we're talking to some people out there that are just thinking about venturing into a studio, is there any kind of key things that you think they should do first or think about before they?
Absolutely. I actually have helped other people find studios, and the number one thing I suggest, besides of course touring the studio and talking to the engineer or producer, is to sit in on a session if they can. And I think that right away you get a feel for how the artist and the producer engineer interact.
Right.
Is there respect? Does the engineer seem to know what they're doing? Like it's pretty obvious when an engineer gets flustered and they're like, oh, no, not that button, that one. And whereas a seasoned engineer, you can tell. They it's very fluid. They're editing as they go. They're, marking tracks they like with color codes and so forth. So you can pick up on a lot just by sitting in.
Okay. Yeah, that's good advice. Sometimes it's hard to do that, I think, because people don't want like strangers on the session. But if you can maybe find a session that works where the artist doesn't care and the engineer is cool with it, then
yeah, and you don't need to be there for long. You can ask when that you should stop by for that session. 30 minutes is plenty of time to get a feel for a session.
Right. Any other things that you think would be good for someone just starting?
As I said, have a knowledge base of what it is that you're trying to do in terms of like, what is the goal of the project? What steps do you need to take to achieve that goal? Talk to the studio owner or engineer, whoever you're going to work with, and find out what their vision would be for a song, things like that.
Do you think about how much time you're going to need? So if you go into the studio, do you kind of like, okay, well, I think this will take this much time, so I need 4 hours?
I didn't used to, but now it's embarrassing how organized I am in the sense that I have it charted out to the hour. But I've done it for a while, so I know I'm going to bring in drums and bass, and we're going to need an hour and a half to mic that drum, and that's all listed so that I plan. I know how long it takes me to track vocals, so I can plan for myself, versus if I bring in my collaborator, Deb, who can knock it out in 3 tries, 3 passes, it's, it's going to be a different amount of time. But yeah, I do definitely plan out the amount of time.
Yeah. And if you're new to this, I think you just talk to the engineer that you're going to be working with and say, well, this is my goals. Like, these are the things that I'm trying to get done. How much time do you think it would take? Because they will know from their experience a general amount.
Right.
But, you might have to pad it a little bit, especially if you're new, because you might be nervous. You might not realize that maybe you're more perfectionistic than you thought you were, and you're going to redo it more times. Or
red light syndrome.
We talk about that so many times.
And you need breaks.
Yes.
You do.
And you got to account for that. Those are important. Sometimes I've gone to sit in your lounge, Roy, with my guitarist because I didn't like what they were doing, and we've just sat there for 10 minutes and kind of worked it out and came back.
Yeah.
So the spotlight's not on him.
Exactly.
You remove him from the...
Right. It's kind of easier. Yeah, that's a good tip, I think, for red light syndrome, is sometimes you need to take that break, go somewhere else, work out whatever it is that's, you're having trouble with, and then come back. Yeah, instead of like frustratingly just staying there and like doing take after take and just annoying yourself.
Right. And your engineer. You feel it when you're annoying your engineer.
We try to be very patient, but occasionally.
That's the bad thing about aging, is your mouth, instead of curling up like a smile. So when you're sitting just waiting for somebody to do their part, when you're older, your mouth looks like a frown. So you look like you're grumpy, like, get on with this. But you're really just content.
You're never grumpy, Brian.
Waiting for the part to be ready.
Yeah.
That's just my inner thoughts.
Yeah. Listen, I probably have a resting flat face, I think. So I'm probably guilty of that, even though whatever. But what other things have helped? Have you experienced this kind of nervousness, what we call red light syndrome?
I have, and I've had to think about what the experience will be like before I walk in the door and ask for what I need. So for instance, I remember recording Love to You with you, Roy, several years ago, and I had been only singing that song sitting down. So why come to the studio and stand up? That's going to feel unfamiliar to me. It was in a comfortable range. I didn't need to be pulling a lot from my diaphragm. So you brought in a orange ottoman from your living room, which I was very honored by, because you're like letting me use your personal furniture, but that's what I needed to sit on to feel completely comfortable. Whereas there could be another song where I know I'm going to be standing up, and sometimes Brian, you brought this up years ago. I'm very theatrical. So I've learned to take what you said and apply it. Sometimes I dress the part so that I feel more comfortable in the role of the person that I'm singing about. Not all my songs are about me. So, I do think it through.
That's cool.
And now, a word from our sponsor, Rarefied Recording. Oh, that's me. I would be remiss if I didn't mention my studio, Rarefied Recording, and the services I offer there. The studio itself was built from the ground up, from the masterful plans of Mr. Wes Lachaux, so it sounds fantastic both in the control room and the live room. A 32-channel Neve Genesis console holds center court and is complemented by a wide array of outboard gear, instruments, and microphones. Your music will be in good company. If you live in the San Diego area, just head on over to rarefiedrecording.com to learn more and book a tour. You can also hear examples of my tracking and mixing work. If you aren't lucky enough to live in San Diego, let me be the first to suggest the idea of a destination recording experience. San Diego is BBB approved. The Better Business Bureau? No, beaches, burritos, and beer. Even if you're not a beach person, who's to complain with temperatures that are very often in the 70s? Even the winter months are averaging in the mid-60s. And being relatively dry, rain is unlikely to get in your way. The studio is very centrally located, and you can get to just about anywhere in the area in 15 to 20 minutes, even Mexico. And while burritos are technically not a food you find in Mexico itself, San Diego has taken the concept to blissful culinary heights. You can't go hardly 100 yards here without running into a little taco shop that will be 10 times better than whatever options you have in your town. If Mexican isn't your thing, no worries. There are tons of great restaurants in the area, including a barbecue place 3 blocks away that rivals anything I've tried in Texas. And adjacent to it is one of over 150 craft breweries in San Diego. If you love beer, we gotcha. The West Coast IPA style is a specialty here, but we've got brewers doing all kinds of beers, and several have tasting rooms in walking distance. Did I mention that accommodations are available? So head on over to rarefiedrecording.com and reach out for a quote today. That's RAREFIED recording.com. And now back to the episode. What other kinds of things maybe related to getting inspired have worked for you? Like if you're trying to get in the song.
Into the feel of the song. I definitely look at pictures. If I like singing to somebody, I will always share the backstory, whether people want to hear it or not. I'll be like, oh, did I tell you what this song is about? Because that just helps me relive why I wrote it.
Yeah.
I take a lot of notes as I'm writing, and sometimes I'll read through those so I remember the intention of the song. And then I think about my audience. Like, who am I singing this to? It's really interesting to send a demo to someone and they'll say, did you write this about me? That's like, to me, that's such an honor when they say that. But if you write, emotionally rich lyrics, you're going to impact somebody. And I know that I'm going to be releasing this song online and I want my audience to feel it. So I have to feel it. I have to be believable and believe in it for other people to feel it.
Do you like to turn the lights down, candles?
Absolutely. Lights down, candles. I don't mind people looking at me anymore because I close my eyes. That's why I have to memorize my lyrics, because my eyes are closed.
There you go. Yeah.
But definitely lower lights. I don't like fluorescent lights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all really good stuff. I remember when you had like a picture or something that you were looking at when you're singing. I thought that was brilliant.
Thank you. Yeah. And you have to not be afraid to take breaks again. Like, hold on, I need to look at this picture and like connect. I even actually have videos of people that I'm collaborating with, since I do a lot of collaborating between studios, and one of my main collaborators in Northern California, and she'll have like a little pep talk video. I'll be like, hold on, I need to look at Sarah for, just a minute. But it gets me back into the feel of the song. So.
Yeah. Let's talk about collaborating, because you have collaborated with a lot of other songwriters, for instance. How does that work out when it comes to the studio in terms of organizing it, payment? I don't know what you can share there, but
It's different with every project. So can you break that down into one question at a time? There's a lot of
Sure.
pieces to that.
Yeah. Let's say you co-wrote a song with someone, right? So how do you decide who's going to actually organize the studio session for this song?
Well, I organize all the studio sessions because I like to take charge of things.
Okay.
So that's pretty obvious. But in terms of payment and ownership, I now do legal contracts because I do so many songs. And now that I'm writing for Sync, which I know we're going to get into later, it's important to identify those components before you start. And I'll usually collect the payment and pay the whole amount, but we'll have predetermined how that's all going to work in advance. We have a discussion about it.
That seems key. Yeah.
Yeah.
Having discussion and having something on paper.
Yeah, it's a legal contract now.
Yeah. Probably makes sense just so everyone is clear and there's no questions later about the split and what have you. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. The collaborators are sometimes not in the same location as you, right? Like, do you ever have them like somehow connected into the session or?
So we do use audio movers here and at my studio in Mendocino, which I do record there in person sometimes, but mostly I'm working remotely with my collaborators up there. And we've learned how to, it's multiple things going on with the cell phone so that you can talk and they can hear you, but you can hear them. But then I can weigh into the session or they can weigh into my session. I've also done that with Matt LaBarbera in New York. We've done a session and I was on audio movers and texting notes and so forth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. For the audience, audio movers is a really great tool that we have in the studio that lets you kind of stream right from the DAW, let's say Pro Tools, so full quality audio basically, as long as your internet service is good enough, you can stream that straight out of Pro Tools to someone else and they just open a web browser and they can just, even on their phone, they can hear it. But ideally they're in a place with good speakers and they're hearing studio quality,
It's amazing, really.
And almost real time. I mean, a little latency because it's going over the internet, but
yeah. But you had another question about kind of implying how do you know who's going to sort of run the session? I don't know exactly how you worded it, but more recently, particularly with a collaborator that I work with a lot, we've decided we would take turns kind of being the lead producer or decision maker, I guess you would call it, because we're sometimes not the producer on a song. So that way, if a song really means something to me, I'm the one who's going to be like, no, I don't want drums. I just want light percussion or whatever. And so we know going into the session, of course, we're going to all weigh in, but somebody has to take charge. Otherwise, it's very easy to get upset with each other. Like, I didn't want it to be like that. There's a lot of give and take if you're going to have a successful collaboration, and you have to trust the process and trust the people you work with. That it may not be your vision, but it's still going to be good. It might be even better.
Yeah.
But having that defined before you walk in the door is super important.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So someone kind of takes the lead because it's like their song more, sort of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or means more to them or whatever. And typically there is somebody who's contributed more to the song, even though I only do 50-50 splits if it's one person, or 33-34 if it's two of us, two other people. But typically somebody has really taken the lead on the songwriting.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
That's cool.
What about when it comes to hiring session players? Because I know you've done that. How do you pick people? What do you think about using session players?
I love using session players. It's expensive, but they're so talented. I trust in the people I work with. So, for example, you've recommended session players. The other producer that I work with has recommended session players. And at the point I'm at now, I will typically ask for a phone consult before we work together. And now I know what I want from them. So I will send them the song. I'll send them charts, ask them to do a demo for me if it's a vocalist. If it's a drummer, no, they don't need to do that. But a vocalist, that's part of the process. They'll do a demo and send it to me to make sure that they're interpreting the song the way I am. I mean, of course, I'll do a demo for them first. And yeah, I think it's wonderful. And I love live drums and bass. That is just the best. I love doing a scratch track. just to acoustic guitar. I did that with you recently, Brian. We recorded Alibi here, and we actually had a drummer, bassist, and an acoustic guitar player all playing off of each other, and it came out so good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like when you have multiple musicians playing together, then it's like this interplay that happens, and you don't get that otherwise. You know?
Yeah.
Very true.
And it was this track I ended up picking wasn't perfect, but I loved it because it sounded like a live band at a concert, you know, and that was the vibe I was going for.
That's great. It's good to hear.
Yeah.
Live musicians. Do you find that you save money by hiring a pro rather than trying to work a part out with somebody who's maybe an amateur?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, that's what I would think.
Definitely. And particularly now I've learned to always have a reference song. And I really listen to reference songs carefully for the different components. So not every session musician would necessarily have the same reference song, but you know, the drummer needs to know the sound that you're looking for, and they will be able to nail it. Usually like even 1, 2, 3 takes.
Yeah.
So even though, there's money involved, it can be very efficient if you hire high quality musicians for sure.
I agree.
Yeah, that is very true about session players. It doesn't take them long to get it just great.
Yeah.
You know, and add a flair maybe that you wouldn't get, you know?
100%. And I love watching songs developed. I mean, songs, they take on their own life, and I'm open to that. And so I always tell my session players, you know, do one take where you just pretend I'm not in the room, like I've left to go get the pizza. And sometimes that's the one I'll use because, you know, they'll add all these nuances and just cool little things that they come up with that I never would have visualized. But granted, the vocals are there. I always make sure that I have a scratch track because I don't want them stomping over where I know I'm going to be or my vocalist is going to be. So they're in the spaces between the vocals.
That's important. Yeah. You can't leave that vocal out for too long because people will start playing on top of it accidentally.
Right. And
doing a melody that's counter to it or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and then the editing's not going to sound right.
Yeah.
So
I always like that though when you have a musician out there, just say, okay, take a couple takes and just do what you want. Go crazy.
I literally said go crazy, and they did. You witnessed it.
Yeah.
No, that's great advice. I think always have your session players do like a free crazy take, you know, because you never know what you might get.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just one fill or something that was amazing, and they would never have done it if they weren't allowed that space to just do what they feel.
Right. And with the editing capabilities now, you can say, I just want that one spot, but I want it here. And you can just have your engineer move it to where you're like, maybe it's going to be the intro, you know, and that can be cool. So
totally. That's good.
Yes. You've talked a little bit about producers already. You know, what else might you say about choosing producer, working with producer?
I will only work with producers who are musicians because since I don't have a band, actually I shouldn't say that. I have a band in Northern California, but not one here in Southern California. I want producers who can play the different instruments for me. So that's really critical. It's not important to me that they understand music theory. I'm realizing a lot of the best people I work with really do everything by ear. But they need to understand my music theory. So, you know, when I say I want E minor 7, they need to know what that means.
Okay.
And I think also it is definitely a collaboration. I look for a producer with a soft touch, meaning they're not going to be pushy, but they need to weigh in. Otherwise, why have their help? And so it's a balancing act that, you know, you need to find. And when you find someone that you can get that balancing act successfully producing music, then, you know, you stick with that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you're looking for feedback, but you don't want someone to just completely stomp on your vision and just roll over you. Right.
But on the other hand, I also, as the artist, have learned to be very open to different styles. So for instance, maybe I have done my demo and I have a certain strum that I'm using, and the producer will say, are you willing to just listen to another idea? We do test tracks, by the way. I don't just complete the song. I come in and I'm like, okay, here's the idea I have. Let's take 10 minutes and do one test track, just, my strum.
Okay.
Just really steady. And then, what about a syncopated strum? Or maybe you want this to sound more like rock, or maybe there's some R&B element to it. And so we'll have a different test track. And there's been times when I've really not liked what they came up with, but I gave it time, like really listened and realized I can sing to this, or I can bring someone else to sing to it. And it makes the song much more interesting. So I think that's important to experiment a little bit.
When you have a producer who plays a lot of the instruments, do you ever find that you need to bring some other elements in to play these parts? Because I've worked with producers in the past who play everything, and it becomes this thing that a band wouldn't do. So it's like you need to interject a different personality playing a different instrument, So in other words, not letting the producer play all the parts.
Definitely, I've had situations where we've done sort of mixing and matching of musicians. It, again, depends on the project. And some of the projects I do, I really like folk music. So I just want, the soft percussion. I don't need to worry about that so much, We experiment a little bit with different sounds. But definitely I've brought in other people, and the producers are open to that. Actually, they love it because it's fun to, get new ideas. And I have a goal of having every project I do bring in a new element. So whether that's a new musician coming in, like for a long time I didn't have viola on my songs. Now I love viola. But now I'm thinking, well, I haven't done horns. Like there's so many things. You could just never stop coming up with new ideas. I have never brought in someone to play harmonica, So all of those things are going to change the tone of the song, and in a cool way, possibly.
I remember the one time when I had to step into a little more of a producer role, because I don't typically call myself a producer, but I think it was a session where you couldn't come.
It absolutely was. It was
something
Mendocino.
Came up, the song Mendocino, and something came up. You couldn't make it. You're like, just try putting some percussion on it. And I had my intern with me, and
well, I had met your intern at the previous session, and I had seen him kind of drumming on his lap. So I knew that he had a good sense of rhythm.
Yeah.
And I asked if you guys could just work something out, because I had prepaid for the session. I didn't want to lose my money. And I figured, why not? What the heck? And it came out so good. Right. To this day, I don't even know how many instruments you used for percussion. I think you said there were 17 different sounds that you used, because you just tried a bit of everything. And I used it. That was the track. And it's gave it so many unique sounds, and it really matched the feel of the song. So to this day, that's one of my favorite songs that I've done.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it came out great. Yeah, it was fun to do. Just sort of like, okay, well, let me see what I think this needs, and thank you for giving me some trust there.
Absolutely, and I think the fact that I wasn't here probably was to your benefit, because you're just like, okay, if this is what I'm hearing, hopefully she'll like it. If not, what can I do?
Yeah. I just directed my intern. It's like, okay, we're gonna have you play this now. Play it kind of like this, and we just sort of layered a bunch of different percussion things until we came to something that felt right.
Yeah.
So that's
super fun.
Yeah. Now, recently you've been getting into sync licensing, right?
Yes, I have. Did you?
Tell us about that. What made you get into this? What have you learned about doing it? Because it seems like one of the few ways to actually make some good money with your music these days, right?
Yes. A couple things. One is, Roy, you mentioned to me in 2022, have you ever thought about writing songs to sell them? And I was like, no, I haven't. And you said, well, maybe you can make a career out of it. A modest career was your words, which I thought was honest. But I thought, wow, you have a lot of musicians come through. So if you think I could do that, then I probably can. But I was also working with a collaborator in Florida who was starting to write for Sync. And I connected with her mentor, Joseph Capalbo, and he's a award-winning sync writer and producer.
Nice.
And just an overall great person. And so I started getting some training. I didn't want to just start writing sync songs without knowing what I was doing. I wanted to know the structure, and there's a lot of things to learn about. edit points and sting endings and the way a song builds and the kinds of instruments you use. At first, when I started, I wanted to use live musicians, and I realized they were looking for a more modern sound, and a lot of that's going to come from, electronic elements. And so I had to be open to that. And then once I really felt like I understood the structure of it, then I started, creating some songs. And then there's the whole part about figuring out how you're going to get your songs heard. So to this date, I have 64 catalogs that I've tried to connect with. I keep, copious notes on everything that I do. And, you just wait to see if somebody will even respond to you. And then if they do, then you see if you can create a connection with them and get your songs in their catalog.
So you've had to one-to-one personally reach out to these kind of music catalog companies, I guess?
Yes. Yeah, I do that myself. I don't have someone, a publisher of any type. I created my own publishing company, actually, once I got a song in a catalog last year.
So if someone's looking to just start getting into this, what's maybe like the first thing that they should think about?
Do your research and also know the kinds of songs that are in need. I mean, probably 90% of the songs that are submitted to sync are going to be more sad songs. They're easier to write. Writing a motivational, upbeat pop song is not easy. So, if that's something you think you can learn how to do, which is something that I've been working on, or just find your niche. For me, recently, I realized my niche is Latin pop. And once you find your niche, then you can start developing it. And I work with a local singer-songwriter, Montserrat Lopez, and we've created this system for writing these songs that's efficient. It takes us about an hour and a half to write a song from start to finish. But we know exactly what it is we're trying to do in terms of like, what's the meaning behind the song? We always have a reference song. I will tell people that is the best advice I can give you. Have a reference song and analyze that reference song. What were all the instruments they used and why was that song such a hit? Deconstruct it. I deconstruct songs all the time, meaning I break down the song in terms of song structure, the instruments that are underneath, the chord changes, that kind of thing.
Wow.
And so, that's how I got into Latin pop, and it's really fun. I enjoy it a lot.
I mean, had you written Latin pop songs before?
No, but I started listening to a lot of Latin pop, and the very first one we wrote in Spanish. She speaks Spanish, and so, we talked about it in English and translated it. But after that, we were writing them. I don't care for the term Spanglish, but I know that's the term that people understand. And so we were just trying to figure out when it felt right to start switching languages. And they're pop songs. I know how to write a pop song.
Do you find that some of the, how certain words in English you can't sing very well?
Yes.
Do you find the same thing with some of the Spanish words?
Sometimes, and we've had to take words out or, stick with the meaning, but it's not a direct translation. Absolutely. Because singability is number one.
Absolutely.
But hearing Monse sing in Spanish, it's so smooth. And so it's usually pretty easy to create the right sound when she's singing it. Yeah, she does all her vocals.
Cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
From my understanding, one of the important things with sync is, you have to be able to make a lot of songs because you just don't know which one is going to be picked up. And you can't have a small catalog. You need to really crank them out. So you need to kind of find an efficient way to work so you don't spend too much per song, right?
Right.
So any advice you have for people out there who are thinking about getting into it and how to be more efficient like that?
I literally have a step-by-step process of, we start with a theme, the lyrics, the reference song, starting to build out the demo and just going through the process. We still want high quality. Yeah. But it's formulaic, and knowing the formula, knowing the length of the song that is going to be ideal, how the instruments are going to build and planning that out.
When it comes to recording them too, what have you done to make that fast? And
there's only one session for the initial track. We'll all be in the studio together and we'll get the scratch vocals and an instrument, the main instrument. And then we give our producer time to build out the track because she needs to be singing over all of the instrumentals. And then she goes in and we just have one session for lead vocals. And then we'll usually do a couple songs in that session. and then go back to do all the ad libs, which are super important for sync, by the way. They like a lot of ad libs and a lot of cool harmonies. And so we'll have a session that's focusing in on that. So it's very compartmentalized because, you go in to sing lead vocals and there's diction you have to think about, clarity and all that, vocal presence. Whereas when you go for ad libs, you're going in and it's a little bit more fun. And in our songs, they're kind of flirty. And so, she gets into that mode where she's singing in this more sultry voice or whatever. And it just lifts the song up.
Yeah. So you've kind of outsourced the instrumental part to a producer that you're collaborating with and letting them kind of just running with your demo to make that?
Yeah. We're working with Chris Town at Capricorn Studios, and he does all of the instrumentals. Almost all of it is done electronically, but we like to add one live element per song.
Okay.
So maybe we'll just do some live bass or a little bit of live guitar because we're doing this Latin sound. So sometimes guitar can sound really nice to get like this, just a little bit more of a feel to it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
It's nice to hear that there's something that's not 100% programmed from a virtual instrument. Yeah.
It makes a difference.
I imagine it would.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus the vocal, of course.
Right.
Yeah. Very interesting. We are about out of time, Tavia, but thank you so much for coming.
Awesome.
If someone wants to find your music, what's the best way?
They can go to Tavia on any of the streaming platforms. It's the Tavia with the ocean picture.
Okay.
Or Tavia Breen on Instagram.
Okay.
How do you spell Tavia?
Tavia.
And so for Instagram, TAVIABREEN?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, and again, it's a collective of musicians, so it also says Tavia Collective.
Right, yeah. We've been starting to refer to it as the Tavia Collective.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you have so many collaborators and
Right.
session players and stuff like that you've been working with.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's fun
You're
talking
welcome.
about this journey.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it's great to have a musician on and get that perspective of someone who's worked with a bunch of studios and learned a bunch along the way. So thanks again
that's
for coming.
important.
Yeah, because that's you guys out there. So yeah. All right, guys. Well, we'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now. That's our show for today, folks. Thanks so much for listening to Prepping for the Studio. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to your podcast from. And don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends. Episode info and my ebook, A Musician's Guide to the Recording Studio, are available at preppingforthestudio.com. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out there. Prepping for the Studio was recorded and edited at Rarefied Recording by me, Roy Silverstein. Theme music written by myself and Ariel Levine. Performed and recorded by Ariel Levine. Many thanks to my co-host Brian Scheuble and you. Best of luck to you and your musical endeavors. And remember, as Alexander Graham Bell once said, before anything else, preparation is the key to success. We'll see you next time.